Here now is Harvey Kronberg with the Quorum Report, and the Democrats' Texas two-step is now history. About time?
I would think so. Texas two-step means that there's both a popular vote in the primary and then the caucuses
very
get together.
complicated.
And it just lends itself to a perception of mischief, which is probably not the message you want to send from your nominating convention.
Yeah.
It gave Hillary Clinton some prospects in the 2008 primary. So I guess if you were a Clinton supporter, it was a good deal. But by and large, nobody understands it, and those are the kinds of things that dissuade volunteers and convention goers and participants in the process.
Of course, the irony, I guess, at least as we look at polling right now, that by the time things develop here in Texas with the Democratic primary, there's probably not going to be an issue on who gets the majority of people at the polls.
It's certainly, unless there's something, some bombshell
something
we're
could
not
happen, right?
anticipating, it looks like a clear path for Mrs. Clinton.
Yeah, it wasn't like the Obama-Clinton of 2008. Okay, spouses of gay public employees are now suddenly eligible for benefits. What was your reaction to that news just days after the Supreme Court's decision on same-sex marriage?
I think it's incumbent on virtually every government agency to follow the law. And the Supreme Court, in its opinion, was explicitly clear what the law of the land was. And until there's some kind of legislation or a court effort to mitigate that, I think that they just approached it straight up and did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, and we're seeing now, of course, here in Travis County and a few other counties, initially a lot of people going to get marriage licenses and get married by justices of the peace. We're seeing more numbers across the state now. These benefits now being provided by the state.
Well, some of the conservative organizations, those that are still engaged in the culture wars, issued press releases saying this was done in the dark of night. There was no conversation. There were no meetings about it. There was no argument about it. Well, the Supreme Court was pretty explicit. And the day after the decision, you start implementing what the law of the land is.
We talked earlier in the week, you and I, about the state's reaction, state leadership's reaction. Meantime, today you posted a column on the Quorum Report regarding the AG's opinion that we've discussed. What's your assessment today now? What's the point that you make in this column?
Well, specifically, I had a chance to reflect on the Attorney General and his opinion, or press release, as I think it was more of. Plus, I've had a chance to talk to attorneys. Not being an attorney, you don't want to jump out there without having some corroboration. Study the family code a little bit, and I think that the Attorney General's opinion was a conclusion they knew they were going to get to, and they had to go through somersault hoops and contortions in order to get there. There is no discretion for county clerks. They either perform their duties or they can be removed from office. That's very contrary to what Attorney General Paxton was saying. More importantly, everybody's been focusing on the county clerks, but he created a new test for judges to whether or not they wanted to try cases. He said if they had deeply held religious views that they should have an out on being able to do that. Well, that's kind of reverse venue shopping. If you have deeply held opinions against the death penalty, does that mean you shouldn't be adjudicating cases where the death penalty might be in play? If you have whatever your deeply held opinion, that's a new test. We put our judges in place by election to adjudicate disputes in the law, and we expect them to be fair. And if they can't uphold the oath of office, just like with the county clerks, then there's no compulsion to remain a judge. There's no compulsion to remain a county clerk. Simply resign.
We got a couple of minutes left, so let's take a look at some presidential politics. And yesterday on the show, I had shared a 5-poll average of the presidential contenders. Since that time, there is a new poll, and we're going to show it full screen here. And what it's indicating that we're going to see the first top 5, followed by the second tier, but always the top 10, because that's important, right? With the debates coming up, and that's what they're going to be.
Debates.
Right, they're saying, hey, top 10 to be on the key debates. And you've got, in the case of the top 5, Jeb Bush clearly showing himself as the front runner, but Donald Trump moves up with a significant jump. He was in like around 3%, and now he has vaulted into second place. Of course, this particular poll was done before the announcement that NBC was going to be firing him.
Macy's was going to be discontinuing his line. Carlos Slim was dissolving the partnership. It was $1 billion, as best I can tell, it was $1 billion presidential announcement. In terms of business lost.
Well, you know, so if we round out now this, Mike Huckabee takes a leap up here too. But let's go into the second half of this top 10 list, because it is important in terms of who makes the TV debate. And Marco Rubio at 6%. Scott Walker drops a little bit here. Of course, he's yet to announce, the only one on this list here that has not announced yet. Rick Perry, our former governor, has moved up to 4%, now in the eighth slot, which is very important potentially for him on making a TV debate. Chris Christie, who just made his announcement, of course, this poll was conducted before the announcement at 3%, and Ted Cruz taking a bit of a dive in this CNN ORC poll from the last time at 3%. Now, we have to make mention it's a plus or minus 5% margin of error. So a lot of people in the mix here. What do you think of all of this in terms of our Texans who are involved?
Well, the simplest conclusion is that at least Governor Perry is moving in the right direction. Senator Cruz is moving in the wrong direction. And the Senator Cruz's fall is somewhat precipitous, going from double digits down to low single digits. The big question about Cruz has always been how durable he is. He's essentially a purist and absolutist, and that plays in certain constituencies. This is way too early to draw any definitive conclusions, but Governor Perry has been working to remake himself, and even at this infinitesimal level, it suggests that people are taking a second look at him.
Okay, Harvey, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
And we're back with more right after this.